Nomberg, and I'm here with my friend Dave Bledsoe. We're here for our weekly talk about the law. We've been doing this for numerous weeks now. Thank you for those who have gone and watched us live, and for all of those of you who have seen us on our Facebook feed as well as the website. Again, I'm Bernard Nomberg with the Nomberg Law Firm. We're out of the office today. We're at the gym, the clinic Mr. Dave Bledsoe has, and he is going to talk with us today about another area that is important with the work comp world, and that is functional capacities evaluations and where that fits into the work comp process. And Dave, I appreciate you coming on today, and if you would, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your place here.
Sure. My name is Dave Bledsoe. I'm an occupational therapist, or OT, and OTs can work in a lot of different settings. I choose to work in the area of industrial rehab, or most of my patients are workers' comp. With an OT, or occupational therapy, we're thinking of occupation. So for a child's occupation would be play, an elderly person would be maybe just dressing, hobbies. But for my people, the occupation is truly their occupation, what they do at work. So most of my patients are from 18 to, say, upper 60s, and they're still working. And so that's all we treat here at the clinic is industrial rehab or work accidents.
Dave, let's talk a little bit about the work comp process and where functional capacity evaluations fit into that.
Okay. Well, first of all, functional capacity evaluations we'll call FCEs. FCEs are at the very end of your work comp process. If you get injured, you go see a doctor, you get some treatments, maybe you have surgery, you have some therapy. At some point, the doctor says you're about as good as you're going to be. Sometimes they call this maximum medical improvement. So once you've reached that point, the doctor says, well, we need to get some final lifting limits, some work restrictions. So instead of just guessing, they'll send you to someone like me who will put you through a performance test, the FCE, and then we'll try and give the doctor, the lawyer, the work comp carrier, some useful information so that they can assign some safe restrictions.
Dave, when someone comes into your clinic for an FCE, how should they be dressed?
Well, if you can't see what I'm wearing, but kind of like I am today, I wear tennis shoes, shorts, a t-shirt, something you can move around in. If you have scars, I kind of want to see them, so wear something that I can get to them. I usually don't want you to wear flip-flops. I don't want the women to wear heels and not wear dresses. If you just dress like you're coming to work out, you'll be fine.
Okay. And when a person comes into your clinic for an evaluation, how do you know and how do they know what activities or functions they're going to be tested on?
Well, what I do is we got to look at what type of FCE it is. I look at the injury. For instance, if you're a back injury, I know we're going to look at pretty much everything. If you're a finger injury, we're going to focus on just activities where the hands are involved. So the FCE can be real narrow in scope if you have a real small specific injury, or it can be broad if it's an injury or several injuries that have impacted a lot of different areas.
Okay. And give us an idea, take us through a back injury. Let's say, for example, someone's had surgery on their low back and it's a discectomy. There's no hardware involved, but the doctor, the surgeon, wants to know what can this person now do in the workplace. Kind of take us through what a typical situation for that would be for you, with the patient.
Okay. The very beginning of the FCE, you come in, we give you some paperwork, you fill it out, some demographic sheets, maybe a pain drawing where you depict where you hurt, and maybe some other questionnaires about things you have trouble with. After we get that out of the way, we bring you back to this very room, and we'll talk to you about your injury. We'll talk about what kind of work you did. If you're a coal miner, maybe you're a secretary, whatever the occupation is, I try and understand what your work demands are. And then I try and understand what difficulty would you have now if you had to go back. So you might say, well, because I can't sit very long, I would have trouble driving a truck over the road. So I find out what limitations you have. Then we begin doing the test maneuvers. Some of these maneuvers will be walking, squatting, stooping, and ultimately, even though it's not a lifting test, it seems like it all boils down to how much weight somebody can lift. So we do focus on how much weight you can safely lift. We get all these numbers, we collect them, we put them in a nice, neat report, and then we give that back to the doctor, the lawyer, the insurance carrier, all the interested people, so that they can figure out what to do next with you.
What is your understanding, if you can discuss this, once that paperwork is turned over to the treating doctor, what is your understanding of what happens next?
But I have an understanding. I don't know for certain because usually I'm out of the picture at that point. I've done my report and I'm done. But the physician then takes it, and then if he or she agrees with it, they'll sign off on it, and that'll become their permanent restrictions. Sometimes the physician may say, you know, I need another restriction here because I know something else about the case. So typically they take these restrictions and the physician will say, I agree, and then the employer will say, yes, we have a job that meets this, or maybe no, we don't. So it's used as the final restrictions.
Okay, so there are some rare opportunities where the doctor may send the patient back to you for further evaluations?
It can. Sometimes the doctor says, I want to look at this again. Let's revisit this FCE after, say, 4 weeks. And so the patient may return to work at, say, light duty, and they start getting acclimated to work, and then they come back to me for a repeat FCE, where we'll look at those areas that maybe were marginal, and we see if they've improved any.
Are there occasions where you'll have clients or injured workers who come into you who are concerned that they may get injured further during their evaluations? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a legitimate concern, and anybody who's had a surgery, you know, you're a little apprehensive before you do something. I guess all you can really do is trust the therapist that they're not going to put you in harm's way. But you've also got to remember this, therapists are good, but they can't read your mind. So if you have pain, fear, anything, you should tell the therapist. You can say, hey, you know, I haven't done any lifting yet, and you want me to pick up this big heavy weight. So talk to the therapist, and they'll explain why it's safe, or maybe they'll modify the test to make you more comfortable with it. But it's real important that you communicate, because there's nothing wrong with being afraid of doing something you haven't done, especially after a surgery or after a painful injury.
Let's talk about how is it that if someone comes in for an evaluation with you and they're here for 2 to 3 hours or whatever period it takes, how does that testing then equate to what it would be like in a 40-hour work week? And here's why I ask. Most of these folks are going to be geared up and pumped up to come do their very best. But the reality is, in a 40-hour work week, you're not exerting 100% of your energy 40 straight hours in the week, or 8 hours in a given day.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, hopefully the FCE is not your 100% effort. If the FCE is getting your 100% maximum effort, that FCE is too hard. Now, there's no way we can know for certain. If we did an 8-hour FCE, it still wouldn't be enough because we didn't do a 40-hour FCE. So we're never going to have perfect. But what we can do is, through communication with your therapist, and we also look at some what we call physiological endpoints, a fancy word for we look at your heart rate, your blood pressure, making sure you're not working too hard. If your heart rate's going really high and you're working too hard, I'm going to ratchet it down, thinking there's no way you could sustain this activity for any length of time. So hopefully we'll watch these markers, these blood pressure, your heart rate, to make sure you're not overexerting. But ultimately it's the relationship between me and you as the patient, that we talk to each other and I let you know, this is not something I want you to do all day. How often do you think you can do this? So through communication we try and put it. It's not perfect, but it's still a whole lot better than us just guessing based on what you look like.
Okay, thank you, Dave. One or two final questions or areas we'll address. What about those people who feel at the end of their test that they didn't do very well in their mind? Now, that doesn't mean that their testing didn't show proper effort and your ratings or your different measurements weren't legitimate measurements. But how does that patient deal with, in their mind, oh, I failed the test? I've heard that so many times from my clients.
Well, yeah, and I've even heard patients who see me and maybe you've had an FCE somewhere else and you say, Dave, man, they said I failed that FCE, I scored a 45. Well, that doesn't bother me. Because you can't fail an FCE. The only way to really fail an FCE is if you don't show up. If you come in and you try your best, then you're going to be fine. And if you do get a report that's not favorable, that's okay. I can look at it, and someone like Mr. Nomberg can explain that FCE to whoever's using it on maybe what the shortcomings were of it, or maybe it's not that bad. But as long as you come in and you communicate with the therapist, you're going to be fine. I've seen very few people in my 25 years, and in 25 years I've done almost 8,000 of these things. I've seen very few people, maybe a handful, who I felt were really, really trying to sabotage or do a bad job on the FCE. Most people really want a straightforward FCE. They just don't want to get hurt again. And so it is a fearful event because a lot rides on that report. And sometimes we can take it, just like it's just one FCE, but it's an important piece of paper. So it's important that the therapist does it right. And it's important that you take the time as the patient to talk to the therapist and let them know, say, I don't think I'm doing so well. I don't think you, and then do some discussion. I'm sure everything will be fine.
Dave, those are some excellent tips from a person who's done as many as you've done in the industry. As a practitioner, we know you to be one of the leading experts in the state, if not the Southeast, and we appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
I know that a certain percentage of the people who come through here are in the work comp process, if you will, but at your clinic here, could you tell us, do you see patients or clients from other areas or other walks of life that aren't part of the work comp process?
I do. I see some of my patients maybe they're in a personal injury case that's not workers' comp related. Some people are doing something like what we call ERISA, which is like a long-term disability case, which the injury didn't happen at work. In fact, the injury isn't a specific injury, it's a disease process, like a gradual onset of COPD or something wrong with the breathing. So there's some patients I see aren't in a work comp case. Others are a personal injury. Some just have a disability that's hit them and it's impacted their ability to just function. And for those people, I do therapy and assessments like the FCE.
Dave, if folks want to reach you or find you, how do they get in touch with you, either through social media or however?
Well, I do have a website. It's not the best website, but it's a website. It's FCE Alabama, and then you spell out the word alabama.com. And from that, you can get my phone number, you can get my email, and all that good stuff. So FCEalabama.com.
Dave, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
We sure appreciate it.
All right.
This will conclude today's topic on the law dealing with workers' comp. Again, I'm Bernard Nomberg with my friend Dave Bledsoe. Please come find us on social media. Our website is nomberglaw.com. Our phone number is 205-930-6900. Hope you have a good rest of your day and good rest of your week. We'll see you next week.